I see quorum, and we are here with the minister and his entourage. First of all, colleagues, I received a letter, the clerk received a letter concerning some correction of numbers on the housing study. We'd already signed off.
It's just on her appearance.
Yeah, well, on that particular appearance, but I just asked the analyst to make sure that the numbers were not included in the report. I'm satisfied that's true, and so I will be tabling in the normal course of events. That's for your information. We are here with Minister Blair to study his mandate, and I see that we're all in order. Ms. Lambropoulos has her chocolate milk. Mr. Bazan has his chocolate milk. I know the minister is beyond excited to be here. So I will turn it over to the minister and see whether, look for his 5-minute opening statement. But I think I should allow a few minutes for you to introduce some of your team who are new to the committee, but very welcome.
Where's that list, Council? Don't leave anybody out.
That's okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me assure you I'm not beyond excited, but I've come right up to the line. And secondly, if I may, just as a point of clarification, you said I was here with an entourage, and that's not entirely true. I'm here with my team. And I'm delighted to have these fine people with me here today. I'm joined this morning by our Deputy Minister, Deputy Minister Stephanie Beck. I'm also joined by the Vice Chief of Defense, Stephen Kelsey, General Stephen Kelsey. Our ADM for Materials Management, Nancy Tremblay, has joined us this morning. And also from CSE, we have our ADM, Wendy Hadwin. And so these are important members of our team, and I'm sure that they'll be able to provide information and insight over the course of my appearance here and later on for their own appearance later this morning. First of all, if I may then begin, Mr. Chair and members of the Standing Committee on National Defense, good morning, and thank you again for the kind invitation to appear before you this morning to discuss our priorities as Minister, my priorities as Minister of National Defense, and to endeavor to answer any questions that you may have. I believe very sincerely it's good to check in regularly given the volatility and rapid evolution of the threat environment that Canada and the world is facing, and as the security landscape is shifting, so too must our priorities, and we must do whatever is required to defend our nation and to keep Canadians safe. The job that we ask of our CAF members is a difficult and challenging one, and we are doing everything we can to support them in that mission. The world has changed considerably since the mandate letter was issued in 2021. As you'll recall, that was well before Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It was before an emboldened China ramped up its assertive, subversive, and coercive behaviors. And it was before the conflict in the Middle East began spilling over at great risk to regional and global security. And while we've made considerable progress advancing our 2021 mandate, we have also had to reprioritize and to adapt in response to this changing context. My greatest priority will always be our people, and that is a constant that must never change. We remain focused on making sure that they have the support and the resources that they need to continue their excellent work that they do on behalf of our country. And for example, we know that CAF families are often at the bottom of local child care wait lists when relocated or redeployed on short notice. It's why Canada's renewed defence policy, Our North Strong and Free, commits $100 million over 5 years to enhance child care services for CAF personnel and their families. We also know that frequent relocations and deployments create unique challenges for our military families when it comes to housing. And our Canadian Forces housing differential came into effect in July of 2023 to help CAF members who are living off base adjust to housing costs when relocating in Canada. We are also going to invest in significant new housing for our members. We need to increase housing availability on basis to make CAF members and their families have safe, affordable housing. And we're putting forward vital initiatives to ensure that our defense team members have the resources and infrastructure that they need to thrive in their important roles. Serving your country can be a difficult and challenging occupation. It should not be made more challenging by the conditions under which they serve. We are also addressing a significant priority of cultural change. We have to make sure that all of our CAF members feel well supported by the organization and their nation that they have sworn to protect. And since 2021, we've made some significant progress on Justice Arbour's 48 recommendations in her independent external comprehensive review of the Canadian Armed Forces to implement meaningful and long-lasting cultural change for the Canadian Armed Forces. I think one of our best examples for that happened just a few weeks ago when the Parliament began the second reading of Bill C-68 that will ensure the criminal code sexual assault cases in the CAF will be tried in the civilian justice system instead of in military court. I want to take the opportunity to thank all members present here for their support for that legislation, and I very much look forward to us completing the second reading and bringing this bill before this committee to allow the committee to do its important work to make sure that it is the best bill for the members of the Canadian Armed Forces. I believe all of the changes that we're working on together will lead to durable military justice reform, and it's going to help CAF members and the Canadian public regain trust in our system. We're also very focused on making new investments. And in response to an evolving global threat environment, we're also investing significantly in new platforms, equipment, and capabilities. The war in Ukraine has taught us a lot about our own strengths and vulnerabilities, both as a country and as a partner and ally in our global security network. These lessons informed our updated defense policy, which places a new emphasis and sharp focus on defending our continent and Canada's Arctic, investing in advanced capabilities to better detect, deter, and defeat threats, and to build up our defense industrial base. We must demonstrate to our allies that we remain a reliable and valuable partner. And at the NATO summit in July, we announced that we will reach NATO's 2% target by 2032. We're equipping our military with 21st century capabilities that's going to allow us to operate across all domains and all environments and alongside our allies and partners, starting with new ships, submarines, vehicles, and planes that contribute to our Canadian Armed Forces operational readiness. We are also modernizing command and control systems. In order to do this effectively, we know that we must usher in new capabilities in a new era, and we need to find a new approach to modernizing defense procurement. We're actively reviewing our procurement processes to find inefficiencies and build better relationships with industry. I would also note that we are making the largest investment in our Navy and our Air Force since the Second World War. And in our North Strong and Free, we've outlined how we'll invest in industry to create new production lines and secure supply chains that will allow us to increase production at home. And this is going to be good for our military, but it's also good for our workers. It's good for our industry, and it's good for our economy. Protecting national security is job one, and I want to acknowledge to you, we have a great deal to do. And since I got this job, I tried to make it very clear. Canada must do more. Canada will do more, because we have to live up to our obligations to defend our country and to our international partners. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll happily now submit to any questions the members may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Blair. We'll turn to our 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Bazan.
Well, thank you, Minister, for joining us this morning. Appreciate that, and along with all the other witnesses that are joining you from your defense team. And thank you for all of the work that you all do in keeping Canada safe and supporting our Canadian Armed Forces and the important work that they undertake. Minister, in the defense policy update, when you compare defense spending that you plan for this year of $33.8 billion, the actual spending authorities for CAF and the Department of National Defense, and I'm talking about the creative counting where we add in other eligible departments of about $7 billion, just the direct spending to CAF and to the Department of National Defense, that is only at $30 billion. Why the $3 billion shortfall? Is that just lapse spending again, or is it part of the budget cuts?
No. I believe that my staff may be able to provide you a more detailed explanation either during this session or the next, and I would invite you to do that. But if I may just simply respond, we had in 2022-23, for example, $1.57 billion in lapse spending. I think it reflects some of the challenges we have in actually spending the money that has been allocated and budgeted for the National Defense Department. The procurement, in particular, of large platforms, it's important because we are stewards of the taxpayer dollars that we make sure that we are spending them well and wisely and getting the best possible value for those investments, but at the same time acquiring the best of equipment. And I can share with you that of that $1.57 billion that lapsed in 2022-23, $1.45 billion of that, or 92%, is still available for defense spending for future years. And this includes $1 billion for adjustments to spending on capital infrastructure projects, $240 million in carry-forward expenditures. I have another long list.
And you can send that to committee in the details.
Clarify something?
We'll definitely look at it.
It's not creative accounting.
Do you know, Minister,
it's actual numbers.
At $30 billion, you actually allowed defense spending, direct defense investment in Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defense to slip below 1%. According to the Library of Parliament, their calculation is that we're at 0.95% when you don't count for the other eligible departmental spending of $8 billion.
And if I may clarify it, the only time that Canada has ever gone below 1% of spending
right now.
was in 2013 and 2014 when you were the parliamentary secretary.
Two different worlds, Minister, and you know
Currently
that.
today,
You know that's two different worlds.
What-
There was no war in Ukraine. There was no war in Afghanistan. We were out of
listen,
Libya. And now we're sitting here where
I
there's
don't
war
care
on
if
our
the context or
front
excuses
steps
for
in
why it
NATO's
happened.
eastern
It's
flank.
only a fact that it did happen. Mr.
I'm
President.
asking the questions here,
And so, and if I may,
Gentlemen, it works better when one person asks a question and another person gives an answer, not simultaneously. So I've stopped the clock. I'll allow Mr. Bazan to re-ask his question, and then we can go from there. Mr.
I'm going to
Bazan.
move on because the minister is just going to talk over me regardless, rather than admit the facts that defense spending is now, again, when we're in a conflict situation with Ukraine where we have a greater adversary than we've ever witnessed in China, where we have Israel defending its rights to exist against terrorist organizations, plus the government of Iran, the terrorist regime in Tehran. I want to get down to NORAD modernization. $38.6 billion. We're getting new P-8s. We're getting new F-35s finally that are all going to get delivered in 2026. Our air wings across this country, including our forward operating locations, have to be modernized and security has to be installed before we receive those planes. To date, you've only spent $30 million. Where is this money going? Like, why is it taking so long? We got planes coming and no infrastructure getting built.
and again, Mr. Bazan, if I may be allowed to answer your question. We've actually budgeted $38.6 billion for NORAD modernization, and we're working very closely with the commander of NORAD and with our American allies in making those investments. According to the plan in those investments, we know that we needed to acquire new capabilities, and as you've already acknowledged, we signed a contract for the replacement of the C-140s with the P-8, and those will begin to be delivered by 2026 with full delivery by 2028. I think that's a very significant
The
advancement.
wings going to be ready to
What's that?
receive them? Are the wings in Comox and Cold Lake going to be ready to receive them?
And I would also share with you that we are also making concurrent significant new investments in infrastructure, building new airport runways and new infrastructure, and acquiring hangar capabilities for the new aircraft that are being acquired. But as part of NORAD modernization, I think the most significant initial investments, according to the plan that has been put forward by Canada and the United States under the NORAD umbrella, is investments in over-the-horizon radar and over-the-polar radar.
So have we selected those sites yet where we're putting those up?
And if I may, we have been advised by our allies that they are working through issues with respect to that technology, which will determine where we should make the best investment
I got one.
in the sites for those.
I think there should be some equivalency between answer and question. I think ministers run past. You still have a minute, Mr. Bazan.
Okay, thank you. So just in my final minute here, Minister, yesterday you made a reference to the Geneva Convention and Israel's right to defend itself. You believe that Israel has a right to defend itself and retaliate against Iran for the attacks?
I think Israel has a right to defend itself and diminish Iran's capacity to
So
attack.
you made the comment about saying that the striking nuclear sites, and we're talking weapons sites in Iran, and he says in violation of the Geneva Convention. I just want to read to you Article 56, as it is in Canadian law on the Geneva Convention, that works or installations containing dangerous forces, namely dikes, dams, and nuclear electrical generation stations shall not be made the object of an attack. I know Mr. Polyev was not talking about electrical sites like nuclear electrical power stations. He was talking about nuclear weapons development sites that is happening right now in Iran. Do you not agree that those sites are fair game for Israel to retaliate against the regime in Tehran?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
It's not a yes or no answer. Canada is a signatory to the 1977 just protocols for the Geneva Convention, the law of armed conflict. The law of armed conflict very specifically prohibits attacking nuclear facilities because of the risk that it poses to innocent civilians and to the environment. That is a convention that the world has agreed to. 174 countries have signed on to that protocol. And I think it's reckless and irresponsible to call for attacks on military facilities nuclear facilities that are very specifically prohibited under international humanitarian
Electrical
law.
power.
We're going to have to leave it Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Collins, 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Minister. In his parting speech, General Eyre talked about he highlighted that our democratic institutions are constantly under attack. You talked about the evolution of the threat environment in your opening statement. And we know that Russia and China are part of a global group that is spreading disinformation and is attacking our democratic institutions. And the DPU highlights this issue. Can you talk about how we address those issues domestically and then internationally with our partners?
It's a multifaceted question, and I think an important one. What we are seeing is the changing environment that I referenced in my opening remarks, and that I think we've highlighted quite very specifically in our North Strong and Free, our new defense policy update, is the changing environment requires an evolution in Canada's approach to its national defense and national security, and those things are very much related. What we are seeing as a result of climate change, our continent, our Arctic is becoming far more accessible. We're seeing with advances in new technologies that those technologies threaten our security, and we need to be able to respond appropriately, which is going to require significant new investments. And we also talk very extensively about the activities of our adversaries. And some of those we're seeing, for example, China is building up the largest military capability, an extraordinary investment in its military capability taking place over the past several years, which threatens to change the balance of security and power in the globe, and something that we and our allies need to respond appropriately to. We're also seeing, as a result of Russia's attack on Ukraine, that
I'm having troubles listening to this exchange. If there is a conversation to be had, I would prefer it to be taken place somewhere else other than the table. So please continue. Yeah, not from the top.
But I agree that we're seeing activities from Russia. One of the things we see, certainly they're challenging us militarily. They're also challenging us significantly in the cyber environment. And I think, and you highlight in your question, the importance of misinformation and disinformation, their efforts to destabilize our society, our institutions, important institutions like our political system, by engaging in polarizing rhetoric, misinformation, fear-mongering, threats and coercion against some of our citizens. Like, all of those behaviors are almost a kinetic form of warfare, or non-kinetic form of warfare. It's asymmetrical, but it's something that Canada needs to respond to because they are direct threats. For the Canadian Armed Forces and through our people at CSE, we are very much engaged in countering those threats and making sure that, and I think we all have a responsibility, that the connection between national defense and national security, I think, is clear. It's going to require advances in our approaches and closer work with our allies. One thing I would share with you as well, in my experience, Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an example, I think their intention was to destabilize the Western alliance and to cause rifts between us. It's had exactly the opposite effect. In my experience, all of the nations of NATO, including Canada and the United States, have become far stronger, far more united, far more resolute in purpose on making sure that we have the capabilities to counter the threat that those two countries represent, and others too, by the way, because we are also seeing that type of hostile activities from state actors such as Iran, North Korea. There is, unfortunately, a growing list of people who are clearly demonstrating that they are willing to engage in a number of very aggressive, assertive, and negative behaviors towards our society, our culture, our institutions, and our country.
I'll follow up with another issue that's related to the changing environment, and that is related to artificial intelligence. And I've read your comments, I think a month or two ago, as it relates to our use of artificial intelligence. And you highlighted the fact that we're going to use it, but it's not going to replace the work that the members of the Canadian Armed Forces do. It's going to assist them in their duties. You also talked about establishing international rules with our allies and our partners. But we know that with the likes of Russia and China, that with most international agreements, they're not a part of it, and they normally thumb their nose at it. And so how do we, Minister, how do we deal with artificial intelligence as it relates to domestically assisting us, but then dealing with that whole issue of there are those in the world that might use it for nefarious purposes, and we have to deal with that?
Thanks very much. And it's a very important question as well. First of all, I think AI represents an extraordinary opportunity for our national defense, for our security establishment officials. And by the way, there is an extraordinary level of expertise and capability in Canada, and I think Canada has much to offer. Perhaps we can talk about that later on in this meeting. Canada has much to offer to our allies in those capabilities. And at the same time, we also recognize that responsible use of AI, particularly in military applications, is something that is going to require some international consensus. But I'm in complete agreement with you. Some of our adversaries have demonstrated that they would thumb their noses at such conventions and will not use it in an ethical way. And we have to make sure that we have the capability. I think it is still incumbent upon us to make sure that we use it in an appropriate and ethical way. And I think that in order to do that, we may have to make sure that people are at the heart of the decisions that we ultimately make with respect to how we engage in military activity. But at the same time, we have to have the capability of countering the negative applications that our adversaries could undertake. It is a very significant policy challenge, but I know that there's been some extraordinary work that perhaps our officials can share with you, perhaps even in a more secure setting, about some of the work that's already underway.
Terrific. Thank you.
Seconds.
Put it in the bank.
Thank you.
Thank
Put
you.
it in the bank, yes. Madame Normandin, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci.
6 minutes. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Minister, for your attendance. Thank you for being available. It's much appreciated. I'd like to get back to a letter that I sent you on June 28th asking for an investigation relating to the actions of your predecessor, Minister Sajjan. It appeared in the news that Minister Sajjan had not given an order to prioritize the Sikh community, but had conveyed some information to the chain of command. And in June, on June 28th, we sent a letter to you, and the Department of Defense sent us a letter a month later in response saying they were examining the matter. Has an investigation started? Has anything started to shed light on this?
Before you answer that question, Minister, I'm not sure that's within the minister's mandate. We're here to examine his mandate, not a predecessor's mandate. And I would be very, very concerned about ruling that question out of order, but
Si
yes.
je peux me permettre.
If I may.
That the minister's mandate letter that he's working on is the mandate letter of his predecessor.
I don't know. I think
I've inherited.
it's a what you've inherited. Okay, if you're comfortable with that question, my immediate reaction is that is out of order, but I'm content to defer.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may, Madam, first of all, I did receive your letter. I've had my team make inquiries as to what information is available with respect to that period of time during the evacuation in Afghanistan. I have received a response from my predecessor, Minister Sajjan, but I also understand Minister Sajjan has agreed to appear before this committee. And so I think respectfully, I would allow him to offer his explanation to this committee rather than for me to try to interpret on his behalf.
Absolument, et je ne vous demande pas de...
Absolutely, and I'm not actually asking you to interpret what's been done or what was done by your predecessor. I'm actually asking you rather to shed light on what happened afterwards and the ways in which information or orders were transferred between the minister and the forces, which is within your mandate, I believe. It seems as though there were some structural issues in the chain of command. If information could be considered an order made by the minister, my questions have to do directly with that. Are there any issues with the forces understanding the difference between the role of the minister and the ways in which these orders or requests are perceived by the forces, to your knowledge?
And thank you very much, Ms. Normandin. First of all, I've been the minister at National Defense now for some period of time. I do not believe that I have any authority to issue orders to the Canadian Armed Forces and to the Chief of Defense. And that's just, I don't have that authority. And so there are some circumstances, some authorities that they require my approval for to give them a certain authority to undertake certain actions. But I don't believe, and in my own experience, I see nothing in the National Defense Act that implies that I would have any authority to issue an order to the CDS or to any member of the Canadian Armed Forces.
Merci beaucoup. Ça éclaire beaucoup.
Thank you very much. That clarifies things. So your understanding is that. So I understand that your understanding is that a minister would be going beyond his role if he were to be micromanaging anything in theater, in the context of military operations. It would go above and beyond his role to interfere or to micromanage.
Well, I have an excellent working relationship, and I have my vice chief of defense with me, who maybe want to add remarks to this. But we discuss their response to operations, and they brief me on the actions that they're taking. I think it is my responsibility to ask a lot of questions, to get information, to clarify certain things. And I think that the value of those discussions, I think we together, we actually can produce better outcomes. But I do not believe that it is my authority to issue an order to the Canadian Armed Forces. There's a very significant separation between my duties as an elected official and a Minister of National Defense and the Chief of Defense's and her team's responsibility to manage and operate the Canadian Armed Forces.
Merci. Je change de sujet.
Thank you. Let me focus on another subject. You announced this summer, you announced $500 million in support to Ukraine. It's been 3 or 4 months since then. How much of that amount has been dispersed at this point?
Yeah, actually, we've also, quite a bit of it, about $350 million, and I stand to be corrected. But when we made that announcement very shortly thereafter, I also announced that we were committing a significant amount of money to the Air Defense Coalition. The training of pilots, Canada was assuming a far more significant role in the training of Ukrainian fighter pilots. And we were taking on responsibility for that and investing a fairly significant amount of money. We've also committed money to 2 other coalitions, one for the acquisition of munitions, which is operated primarily led by the Czechoslovakian. There's the Czech Republic, that we're investing money in them to acquire munitions more quickly through the NATO coalition. And then finally, we're also investing fairly significantly in a German-led coalition, about $79 million for the acquisition of air defense missiles.
J'ai le temps de poser la question pour y répondre dans un prochain.
I have enough time to ask a question. Perhaps you'll get to the answer next time. At the beginning of the year, you wanted to quadruple the 155 millimeter production, which was at about 5,000 of these. Where are we at this point in the year? We're almost close to the end of the year. I would imagine you'll be able to answer in the second round.
Important work in progress, and I'd be happy to come back to it.
Excellent. Thank you. Madame Masson, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for appearing today. 42,000 people have been killed in Gaza alone, almost 100,000 wounded. And now there's land incursion of Lebanon. Thousands of Canadians have reached out to me, very, very concerned on this issue. The United States have confirmed that they are willing to support Israel's escalating this war. Will Canada stop supporting Israel, implement the 2-way arms embargo, and impose Magnitsky sanctions on Netanyahu?
Yeah, those are questions, frankly, not entirely for me to answer, but I can tell you. First of all, Canada does believe in every sovereign nation's right to defend itself when attacked. And, we've just also passed the anniversary of the October 7th attack that was perpetrated by Hamas on Israel. 1,200 people killed, more than 250 people taken hostage. Terrible atrocities committed on that date. And we believe Israel has the right to defend itself. Very similar and guided by exactly the same laws as Ukraine's right to defend itself against the attack on their sovereign nation by Russia. All of the laws of armed conflict, I think, clearly define in international humanitarian law what the limits of your ability to defend yourself it looks like. Canada has and continues to seek a ceasefire in the Middle East. We've also are pursuing, we believe conditionally in a 2-state solution in which Hamas would have no role in the formation of any future government in Palestine. We have also called for
Minister,
the
I-
laying down of arms and the return of the hostages.
in terms of length of question and answer, Chair? All right. The United Nations interim force in Lebanon are peacekeeping force, obviously whose mandate includes overseeing UN Resolution 1701. The Israeli forces have tried to request UNIFIL withdraw so they can continue their illegal incursion. And in fact, this morning there were reports that two United Nations peacekeepers were injured because of these strikes. What is your government's response or position to support the United Nations peacekeeping in the region and your reaction to this attack on UNIFIL soldiers?
And again, it is unfortunate in UN peacekeeping missions that.
Does that fall into defending yourself, or is that an attack on the United Nations?
And again, the application of the law in this case, with respect to the law of armed conflict, I think it needs to be. I appreciate your concern that you're raising. I think that there needs to be investigation and evidence, and if there is evidence of any nation violating those laws, then there is appropriate mechanisms of resolution and justice that can flow from those processes.
ICC and the ICJ?
What's that?
The ICC and the ICJ?
Canada is a signatory to the ICJ, and that is one of the mechanisms in
there's
which
no
these matters can
following
be
of
resolved.
that.
I'm sorry?
Israel has not allowed following of those two important international bodies.
And all I can tell you is Canada's position with respect to these things. I'm not here to try to explain what Mr. Netanyahu is doing, but rather our Canada's response to it. And I think it's been very clear. We very much support the International Court of Justice. We support the law, and we follow the law of armed conflict and encourage all signatory nations to do exactly the same.
It was touched upon earlier, but of course, this week, Conservative leader Poilievre made a truly appalling statement that Israel should strike Iranian nuclear facilities. We know how disastrous that could be. The international community has fought and very, very hard to protect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from Putin's bombings. And your government called that out, that reckless statement out. We certainly did. But Iran has been threatening to proactively attack those nuclear facilities and escalate the conflict even further. So, Minister, is the threat of an attack by Israel on nuclear facilities a red line for your government, and will Canada finally commit to imposing sanctions on Netanyahu's dangerous government?
Yeah, and just to be really clear, it's not my job to start drawing red lines for other countries. Canada states its position very clearly that we believe very strongly and support the international humanitarian law and the law of armed conflict, and that is very clearly prohibits attack on nuclear facilities. We've made that position very clear. And for exactly the purposes that you outlined.
So
we were very concerned, if I may, we were very concerned with Russia's attack in the Zaporizhzhia region because the nuclear
But
facility
Canada would
there.
take no action if this were to occur?
Well, and again, it has not yet happened. I think the appropriate course of action right now is for Canada to articulate its position in support of international law.
There's thousands of Canadians still in Lebanon. I know that we've spoken about potential evacuation, but the problem is that so many people are unable to get to the airport themselves. I know of families who have tried to cross the border to Syria who have not been able to. What's the support that Canada will provide through military forces, I suppose, to help those people who it's simply not safe on the roads that are either leading to the airport or leading to other places of safety?
Okay, what we're dealing with is Global Affairs Canada has reached out and right now, and I don't have the precise numbers, but approximately just under 6,000 people have actually registered with Global Affairs Canada seeking information about assisted departure. The airport's still operating and is still accessible. That's the evaluation on the ground, that it's still accessible. About 60 to 70 commercial flights are flying out of the Beirut airport every single day. Additionally, our country and a number of our allies have been arranging booked seats on some of those planes. The uptake right now among Canadians who are inquiring about departing Lebanon is a little less than, it's about 30% of the seats that we have made available that people have actually taken. They are not reporting to us that they're not taking them because they can't get to the airport. and we are prepared to provide assistance
answer
if
there.
that was required, but that hasn't been asked for at this point in time.
That completes our 6 minutes round. Mr. Bazan, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, do you agree that foreign interference is a national security threat, attacking our democratic institutions, including the Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defense, is not immune to foreign interference?
I sent you a letter in December of 2021 and outlining, or 2020, outlining that exact point.
Point. So I appreciate that. Now, your former chief of staff kept a CSIS warrant off your desk for 54 days because it was politically sensitive to the Liberal Party.
That's
But-
out of order, Mr. Bazan.
It's
That
national
is not
security.
anything to do with his mandate.
So let me come
That
back on
is
this.
out of order.
Minister, as a current,
It also contradicts the sworn testimony that the hearing heard yesterday, and his statement is completely false.
was what she actually said, since you answered the
Well,
question. He addressed
the-
it. I should be allowed
It's
to.
either out of order or it's not out of order. I have to say that once there is a response, it gets to be part of the conversation. So
So,
Fair enough, but
so-
if he's going to make a video, it might as well have a little bit of truth on it.
not
all right, carry on, and we can stay with the program. Stay with the.
So again, you know, in your current role then as Minister of National Defense, and from time to time there's orders that come across your table that are going to be dealing with issues like foreign interference, like national security, that are going to require your sign off. Your former chief of defense or your former chief of staff withheld documents from you for 54 days. How does that not violate and contravene our national security?
And again, the premise of your question is false and contradicts the sworn testimony that the commission heard yesterday. As well, there's nothing political in decisions with respect to the national defense.
So if I quote Miss Estrada, she said, anytime there is a name of someone I knew mentioned in a warrant or intelligence report, I always let the director and minister know. So first of all, she must have let you know then you must have been sitting out on it for 54 days based upon her own testimony.
Bazan, you're making stuff up that isn't true. And I appreciate that you want, but and you may have you're making a video, and that's fine. But what you're saying is simply not true, and it has been contradicted by the sworn testimony of other witnesses. And I've appeared before that hearing 3 times and given sworn testimony, and I'm very pleased to be able to go tomorrow and give that sworn testimony again. And what you're saying has been contradicted by all of the evidences presented to the committee.
Disagree with that. I believe that the testimony does speak for itself, and that does show that that a warrant sat around in your office, on your desk, and under the care of your former chief of staff that was actually, you know, in the middle of here, we have a foreign interference inquiry being done by Justice Hogue, and I believe that the truth will be revealed in that process as well, never mind the testimony that's been given at the different committees here. So I will just share the rest of my time with Mr. Ellison.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank
Morning,
you.
Dean.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. So my question to you is that do you believe that a terrorist regime like Iran should be allowed to develop nuclear weapons?
I'm deeply concerned about the increasing military capability, including the acquisition of military weapons by a regime such as Iran. They have been a state explorer of terrorism around the world, and through the IRGC and through their Quds Force. They have demonstrated, you know, support for other terrorist organizations, and yes, it's deeply concerning that such a regime should have that
So
military
why
capability.
wouldn't Israel then have the ability to attack those sites?
And again, I think the international community has a responsibility to do everything it can to prevent Iran from attaining those things. But at the same time, I think that should not be done in a way that puts countless lives and the environment at
So
significant risk.
are they not legitimate targets?
And again, there are very limited circumstances where those could be legitimate targets, but the international conventions on the law of armed conflict very specifically prohibits the targeting of nuclear facilities, which was frankly what your leader said.
How many? No. What he said was going after sites that are actually responsible for developing nuclear weapons. How many sites in Iran actually produce nuclear energy?
I don't have that information.
To your team? So the World Nuclear Association says 1. We're aware of it. We're aware of it is. So obviously we're not talking about targeting that. So why would we not just say that obviously, we don't approve of them targeting sites that approve electronic. That's not what Israel's saying, and that's not what our leader said either.
I think there is a very serious concern that if anyone was to target a nuclear facility anywhere in the world, whether it be in Ukraine, Zaporizhzhia, or in any place in the world, that represents an unacceptable risk to innocent civilians and to the environment, and that's why 174 countries have signed on to an international convention that very specifically prohibits attack on those facilities.
Mr. Allison Lambropoulos, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister and team, for being here with us today. I guess my first question is going to be about recruitment, because we've heard time and time again that this is something really important and that we're not exactly where we need to be yet in terms of recruitment. We had earlier, a few weeks ago, I guess, witness come and tell us that the goal would be for 6,400 new members to be recruited in this calendar, or in this fiscal year, I guess. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, and if you think that that is enough. If not, what can we do in order to make sure that those numbers grow at a quicker pace?
Yes, thank you very much for what I think is one of our most important questions, because as I said in my opening remarks, people are our most important asset. And I've already commented and expressed very sincere concern that losing more people than we're able to take on is not a successful strategy, and we had to turn it around. I am very pleased to report to this committee that there's been some outstanding work done by the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defence to significantly improve our onboarding and recruiting processes. And I think they've demonstrated real openness and commitment to doing what is necessary to resolve our hiring and personnel issues. There's some very important work that's going on. The new CDS, and I think it's more appropriate for her to perhaps come before this committee and outline, the nature of her plan. But as I have been briefed, it includes, I think, significant new measures. The introduction, as was recommended in our new defense policy, but also in Justice Arbert's recommendations of the establishment of a probationary period. That's going to allow them to bring people on much quicker, to begin their basic training, and then to complete some of the important security background checks, for example, before the person is in a sensitive position, but enables us to get started and really expedite the processes. We're also seeing, a very comprehensive reevaluation that's going on, not in any way to compromise the standards, the very high standards that we require for everybody joining the Canadian Armed Forces and their combat readiness. But at the same time, it's going to enable us to address, I think, more appropriately some of the impediments that we have identified in getting people in the door. There's also been some really good work done, because as I know this committee has been advised, permanent residents were given the opportunity about 2 years ago to make applications to join the Canadian Armed Forces, and about 20,000 of them immediately signed up. We saw that the intake was impeded by some of the challenges in doing over again the security background checks for those individuals. There's been some really good work done between the Canadian Armed Forces and IRCC and others to expedite those processes, and I'm very encouraged by the path that we are currently on. I believe that we've turned a very significant corner, and that we will see an increase in recruitment, but we're not done. There are a number of really important initiatives that I think we can undertake. I think the opportunity that we can give Canadians to serve their country in the Canadian Armed Forces, to engage in real national public service for this country, is a great opportunity for those young people and a great opportunity for the Canadian Armed Forces. And so we are committed. One of the things that I've asked the CDS to look at is there are a number of bottlenecks in those recruitment processes. Then our capacity to put people through basic training is one of those bottlenecks. And so we are looking at how we address that and increase that capacity. We also have a very extensive and comprehensive review going on to our military colleges at Saint-Jean, Richelieu, and at RMC in Kingston. Those I hope are going to give us a number of recommendations that will enable us to make those more efficient and effective in getting the cadre of leadership that we're also going to require for the Canadian Armed Forces.
Thank you very much. I think you already mentioned a few of the obstacles and how to overcome them, or that there are plans in the works, so I'll avoid that question. But another really important point here is the issue of retention and making sure that once they're there, and for those who are already there, that they want to stay because it's a positive and healthy workplace culture. So, you've spoken a little bit about that as well. You spoke about Bill C-68. You spoke about Justice Arbour's recommendations. And I'm wondering if you can tell us where we are on those, how many of them we've actually accomplished or implemented, and what your view is on how we can rebuild trust in the Canadian Armed Forces for future generations.
Yeah, very quickly, just in response to Arbor's recommendations, a little more than half of them have been fully implemented. We have also just recently published in the spring of this year our comprehensive implementation plan for the remaining recommendations, which schedules their full implementation by the end of 2025. That work is well underway. The recommendation that did require changes to the National Defense Act was brought forward in Bill C-66, which hopefully will come to this committee for its important work very shortly. We're also, as I mentioned, investing in housing, because that's what members have told us is a challenge for them. We're investing in childcare because that's important. We're working with the provinces on making sure that for Services Canada, that shared services are available to our members so they can get access to a family doctor, that people can get assistance for their spouse to have employment.
We're going to have to
many
leave the
things that we
answer
need to
there,
do on behalf
Madame
of the armed forces,
Lambropoulos.
and we're working hard on them.
Thank you, Minister.
Sorry, I talked over you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Normandine, yes. Well, wouldn't want to interrupt the flow.
Merci beaucoup. Donc,
Thank you very much. About the 155 millimeters, you said you would quadruple the production of these munitions. We were at 5,000 earlier, and where do we stand now?
Yeah, still a work in progress, but I've been to the munitions production plants in Quebec. I think that we've had a number of important conversations, and our team is working very closely with them. They told us two things. They told us they needed investment in their production lines, and they needed secure supply chains in order to increase their production. They also needed the certainty that would come with long-term contracts, and so that they know that if the orders were there, then they would produce to meet those orders. And so,
avec respect, Monsieur le Ministre,
With respect, Minister, we know what their needs are for the industry. On the industry side, my question is, in actual fact, where do we stand in terms of production?
we are still working very much in the negotiation, because when we went to industry, they told us they needed a certain amount of money of investment. When we went back to them with that money, they doubled it. And then we went back to them with another significant increase in our investment, and they doubled it again. And so I have a responsibility to manage the Canadian taxpayer dollars, and we are stewards of those dollars. And so there's a negotiation taking place about what is the right investment in those industries, and there's also some work to do to complete the long-term contracts that they need. We are going to increase our production and our acquisition of those munitions because we need to do it, but we need to do it responsibly.
merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. General Carignan implied in a way when she appeared before the committee that budget cuts had an effect on the troops' training capacity. I'm wondering if, when those cuts were announced a year ago, an impact assessment was done, and today, whether these types of things are done to see what effect this has on troop training.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very important question, and to be really clear, we cut about $211 million from our budget. And where we made those adjustments and those reductions was on things like professional services, executive travel, hospitality, all of those things. I issued a very clear direction to the CDS and to the Department of National Defense that none of those reductions should impact on our operational readiness or on the services, the important services that we supply to Canadian Armed Forces members. And I believe in the analysis that has taken place that those important services and capabilities were not impacted by these reductions. And at the same time, I think it is incumbent upon every federal department to make sure that we're spending money well and wisely, and that we're getting true value for the investment the Canadians are making in their Canadian Armed Forces.
And at the same time, we are out of time. Madame Matheson, 2.5 minutes.
Part of the CAF D&D class action on sexual misconduct was a number of clear deliverables that were to be taken at the 5-year anniversary, which is very close approaching. One of those clear deliverables is the review of the mandate of the Sexual Misconduct Support and Resource Center. I've heard a lot from survivors of military sexual trauma about their complex relationship with the SMSRC. there's positives, and certainly that is necessary to talk about, but there's also major gaps in the programming and concerns about the structure, unanswered questions about the independence of the SMSRC. So when I asked the Chief of Defense Staff, General Carignan, in her appearance, there wasn't concrete details. So can you tell this committee about the work being done to prepare for this review, and can you commit to ensuring the review will be fulsome, with access to any documents necessary for this review to be done, and will it have a wide enough scope to rebuild trust with survivors?
Thank you very much, and it's a very important question. And you and I have had an opportunity to speak about some of these issues before, and as I've acknowledged to you, a great deal of work has been done, but more needs to be done. I appreciate your acknowledging that I think we've made some real progress on the Sexual Assault Resource Center and the work that has been done in support of victims following this report, which we are coming up in February of 25 on the 5th anniversary, and there's a commitment there to that work. I can share with you that we're currently pursuing a court appointment for the external review team lead. We think that's an important initiative, and I think we've also been able to demonstrate our commitment to greater judicial independence of military justice actors by removing some of these conditions as under Bill C-66, so that these matters are dealt with in the civilian system rather than people having to go to their boss. I also very strongly believe that the decision to pursue an investigation and a criminal prosecution is entirely the agency of the victim, and at the same time, we have a responsibility to provide them with victim support services no matter what is taking place. I think we've also talked about some of the important work that's gone on with Justice Arbor's recommendations, our implementation plan, the appointment of the external monitor, who, by the way, every 2 months produces a very comprehensive report, which I hope that you all have access to, that explains the progress of the work and the implementation of Arbor's recommendations. We're moving on a number of other recommendations, including the Fish report. All of that is, I think needs to be coordinated and brought together in a meaningful way. And restoring trust for all of those people who have experienced is our priority. And,
Thank you.
And very
Thank
happy to
you,
continue to work with you on it.
Ms. Matson, Mr. Minister. Ms. Gallant, 5 minutes.
So what instructions have you given your current chief of staff to ensure they don't withhold information from you that's vital to national security, like the way Zita, your former chief of staff at public safety, and the chief of staff for the former CDS for Minister Sajjan did during the Vance controversy?
I reiterate my view that this is the mandate of the current minister, and his commentary on previous ministers' practices or non-practices is out of scope. However, having said that, proceed.
Chair, I'll defer to your ruling as to whether or not this is in scope or not.
Okay, so there are no measures taken to overcome the problems we had with
And as a
Minister
point of
Vance.
clarification, I did not say that.
Okay, so are you satisfied that Canada is investing sufficiently in cyber capabilities to deter and respond to non-state cyber aggression?
Yeah, we've got some really good news on that. Just a few weeks ago, we stood up our new Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Command under General Yarker they'll be located here in Ottawa, and there's been some very significant new investments.
Great.
In our North Strong and Free, I would point out an investment of more than $1 billion in cyber capabilities at CSC, and I'm sure that my colleague from CSC will be able to expand on that later.
How do the repeated breaches at GAC continue to occur?
And again, I'm in this room. Unfortunately, I'm not going to talk to you a little too much about those things. I think there's some great work that is being done particularly by CSC.
They need more money to get what needs to be done to keep them secure. How are you going to get that money?
The government of Canada experiences billions of attacks on its systems each and every day. And I think our officials do some extraordinary work. And
GAC is still being attacked every day, and the intruders are getting through. So barracks for new recruits are in such poor condition, they've had to be condemned. And you haven't allotted any money to replace these buildings on a number of bases. How are we expected, or how are you going to recruit and retain our lower ranks when federal prisoners have better accommodations?
Yeah, unfortunately, your question omits the fact that there's already existing funding for investing in those things. I've recently been out. We're investing very significantly in new barracks in Esquimalt. We're investing significantly. We just opened up new barracks in Borden. There are already monies already allocated. I invite you to go to some of those bases and see the new
Well, I've been
facilities.
to
that are
my
being built.
base. I've been to
I know,
Petawawa,
and
and they've had
I've
to
been to
condemn
Petawawa
two
with you,
buildings, and
Cheryl.
has been no money in sight to replace those buildings. They don't even have enough accommodations for the current lower ranks. And we've got to accommodate people who are coming in for training for the Latvia mission. So where are we going to put them all? They can't all be intense all winter.
Yeah, and I've already referenced that there's some really important work going on right now to increase our capacity to provide basic training and other training to all of our members. And I would acknowledge after decades of underinvestment in the Canadian Armed Forces, certainly through Safe, Strong, and Engaged, and now through ONSAF, we're making
It too.
well, I was answering your question, but if you'd like to pass it before I complete my answer, that's up to the chair.
You've answered my question.
You have a minute and a half, Mr. Stewart.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Sir, are you okay with Iran developing nuclear weapons?
No.
Okay. Okay. Because earlier you said you were as concerned about it, so that's a very much better answer. I have something a little bit more basic to talk about. It's again about ammunition for our reserve forces. Reports that I've heard indicate that there's not enough 9mm ammunition for our reserve soldiers to get certified on the new 9mm pistols. And I'm just wondering if there's any plan in place to accelerate that condition. And then the next question. Yeah.
Thanks. I was getting an answer for you.
Okay.
Would you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're spending about $200 million on munitions currently. That's our current expenditure. It has not been reported to me, but by CAF or by any indication that the reserves don't have adequate munitions to
Okay.
train. But I don't have the information that you referenced.
The other report I had was that half the Army's equipment is unserviceable. There's a $150 million shortfall due to the government budget cuts. And I just wanted to understand what that says about the Liberal government's commitment to armed forces.
Yeah, you're conflating two very significant issues. There is a real challenge with the maintenance of our equipment. A lot of it's old, and
I see the brand new Lavs at Denison sitting there for weeks on end, not moving.
Yeah, and I'm glad you saw them because we're delivering new vehicles. We've entered into contracts to deliver 1,500 new light and heavy trucks for the Canadian Armed Forces. We've also invested very significantly in new labs that are being delivered. We're doing the work that, frankly, previous governments have neglected in order to get our people what they need. And we are also investing in the maintenance of existing equipment, but replacing it is also a really important
I
priority.
have to leave the answer there, however satisfactory or unsatisfactory it may be. Mr. Pulowski, 5 minutes. On mute, which some people would think is a good thing. We still don't hear you. What is going on, Mr. Clerk? Marcus, we can't hear you.
Can't hear him at all.
Are you plugged in?
Yeah, ask him to unplug and replug.
Unplug and replug. Turn on, turn up.
Can you hear me now?
We can now. Okay.
Oh, unfortunately
You've blown through 9
you can
seconds.
hear me.
So go
Okay.
ahead.
Third time over. Maybe I'll make it better this time. Mr. Minister, you talked about learning a lot from the war in Ukraine. And certainly one of the things that I think we've learned from that is what would seem to be a worldwide shortage of ammunition. The Ukrainians don't have enough 155mm shells. Madame Normandin asked about the production of more shells, and your response was, well, there was a company that was going to provide it, but they doubled the price. And then when we agreed to that, they doubled the price again. I'm not sure how many companies there are that make the 150mm shells, but it seems to me from your response that there's a problem that we don't have enough companies that are making that form of ammunition. And from the previous question, perhaps 9mm ammunition There would seem to be perhaps a market failure here in that under normal times there isn't enough demand for 155 millimeter shells, but now there is, and perhaps in 6 months or a year, it would be nice to think the war in Ukraine could be over. There may not be a demand, but this would seem to me to be the kind of market failure that requires government intervention to support companies starting to produce 150 millimeter shells and other forms of ammunition. Has there been any effort on the part of the government to give incentives to companies to start production of ammunition?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcus, and a good opportunity for me to clarify my remarks. I went to industry when I first came into this job, and I said, we need you to increase your production. And particularly around munitions, but not just munitions. We need a significant increase in military production right across this country. Our industries are very strong and very capable. But I think for a very long time, there's been a significant underinvestment, and we went to them and they said, we need to open new production lines and we need new supply chains. And that's going to require two things, an investment from government, but also long-term, the security and the certainty that long-term contracts provide. And it's one of the reasons we brought forward in our new defense policy updates, significant new investment in both industry and in those long-term contracts. And so what you have suggested is exactly what we're proposing to do. But at the same time, it does require that we work very carefully with industry. They have told us, even if we make those investments in their production capability, because we already buy ammunition from them. We buy a lot of ammunition from them, but we need more. And so we're going to invest in those industries and we're going to offer them long-term contracts. But we also have an interim problem because the Canadian Armed Forces needs ammunition now, and so do our Ukrainian friends. And so that's one of the reasons we entered into an agreement with the Czech Republic. And I have been buying munitions, 155 ammunition for Ukraine through that Czech initiative because they're able to buy it on the market. And so we're funneling money through those coalitions, part of our NATO partnership, in order to acquire those munitions. I am also prepared to purchase on the international market for the Canadian Armed Forces until the Canadian industry is capable of meeting our requirements. But I think that a number of lines of effort need to happen concurrently. We need to invest in Canadian industry. We need to work on those contracts with them. We need to build up their production. And at the same time, we need the immediacy of responding to the needs of, first of all, the Canadian Armed Forces. That's my first priority. But a very close second priority is making sure that we're able to provide Ukraine with what it needs.
My second follow-up question is another thing that the war in Ukraine has taught us is the growing importance of drones. We've purchased F-35s, but if you see what's happening in Ukraine, Ukrainians have managed to do very well with some very cheap drones, sometimes costing hundreds of dollars, destroying much more expensive weaponry on the Russian side. This would certainly seem to be the way warfare is going. What are we doing specifically in terms of research to develop new and better drones, cheaper ways of producing drones, and producing those drones and having those drones in our military?
And I want to, but you've left them very little time to answer it. 30 seconds, a little bit better.
Yeah, 100% agree. Canada has a very robust capability of building drones. We're investing in research and development. We're also looking at anti-drone technologies, and we've been testing those in Canada as well, along with our allies. It's important work. Canada has also invested in Ukrainian production of their own drones, and that has been very helpful to Ukraine. And so we're investing in building some of those cheaper drones that they use so effectively, but it also gives Canadian industry an opportunity to learn from the experience of the Ukrainians and to add that to our research and development. It's very much a partnership that is being developed, and we're also working very collaboratively because Canada is part of the Drone Coalition for NATO, and our industries and our government is working very closely with all of our allies. We see this as a new frontier of both defensive and offensive operations. I think Canada has great capabilities, but we can do better and do more.
Thank you, Mr. Pawlowski. And on behalf of the committee minister, I'd like to thank you for your appearance here today. And I'm going to suspend for a minute or two while the minister leaves and the balance of the team remains in place, and then we'll continue our rounds of questions. With that, suspended for a As a break is concerned, I'm going to work on the assumption that there's no additional statement to be made. So we'll just launch into questions for first round 6 minutes. I see Mr. Stewart is gulping down his breakfast, but he is apparently up for the first 6 minutes. Is that correct?
Sounds correct to me.
Okay. 6 minutes, please.
Recently there were 90 light tactical vehicles that were purchased by the D&D, I think for $36 million. And when you look at a picture of these, there's no ballistic protection like open air dune buggies. And I just wanted to find out a little bit more about that. In testing, U.S. troops had actually ditched some of the vehicles and chosen to finish their training missions on foot. And I'm just wondering, why would we look at spending $36 million on these vehicles that didn't pass testing with flying colors?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the procurement of those vehicles was based on what the Army had asked for mobility for light forces. But quite rightly, it's been pointed out that that's not the vehicle for highly protected or high-end combat operations. It's not to say that through tactics and training, the vehicle could not be employed. In this case, it still has its purpose. They're being fielded in Latvia, as is known, and there is training value that happens from those systems. Ideally, in close combat operations, it's a very different force, a different set of equipment. But in this case, the specific role that the Army requested for those light forces is satisfied with this vehicle.
Is there a condition when we make purchases like this? The purchase was made through GM Defense in Oshawa, my hometown, and but the vehicles are made in the U.S. Is this just something off the shelf? This is the way it happens in NATO, or is there a consideration given to supply chain coming from Canada when we're spending money?
I don't know the specifics, perhaps our colleague could, but when we do those acquisitions, if ideally we want a competitive bid so we get best dollar for value, all so much the better if it's from an Oshawa company in this case. But because of the nature of that specific vehicle, many of the parts are actually made in Canada as well as assembled in the United States and then brought back into Canada.
Can I go back to the question about the 9mm ammunition? I'm just wondering about the supply chain there. Is there a reason why the shelves would essentially be bare for training missions for some of our reserve units?
Perhaps, again, Nancy might know the specifics of our munition supply program and the way that industry manufactures those. It's not a singular line for 9mm. It's a line that produces various natures. It's unfortunate that from time to time there's a shortage, perhaps based on training implication.
Right. Well, would this be the same in theater? Like, there's a shortage. Sorry, there's no ammo.
No, we would, Mr. Chair, we would privilege those folks that are.
So why can't? So now that we're in kind of a globally hot situation, would we not want our soldiers to be trained up, certified on weapons? In terms of readiness, does this not speak to a gap in that?
We agree that we would need a sufficient amount of munitions, training areas, equipment to elevate a higher level of readiness across the board. The issue for us right now is also people. It's the munition availability and the stocks that we hold, but also a function of the time needed in the location. So not every unit, I think the example, Chair, was one of our fine reserve units. Not every unit is at the same level of readiness in our current construct, and therefore, depending on which one we use to elevate its training, may or may not have the ammunition we need.
Okay. In sticking with supply chains, recently there was some reports about our Arctic abilities, including the sleeping bag systems for our soldiers. Is there a plan in place to correct that so that we can operate in our Arctic environments?
There is indeed. Thank you for the question. And I think, as everyone knows, those sleeping bags, that system, in fact, was procured very much as the Army had requested. notwithstanding, there was always a plan for a second round to ensure that for temperatures even colder than those that were required for that particular set were available, and that contract is being let.
I have a quick question about morale. So morale is such an important thing in the Army. And one thing that can improve morale is that every soldier has a complete kit. Does every soldier in the Army have a sleeping bag? Arctic or not?
Every soldier who needs to have a sleeping bag would have the appropriate kit.
Okay. When I was with the reserves, we were asked to bring our sleeping bags back in because there weren't enough for soldiers that were being deployed.
The regular armed forces, right?
I think that, Chair, the question is fundamental to what we want to do with our reserves. We want to do more. We want to equip them better. But we also need to make choice. With the dollar that we have available, we want to spend it wisely, and it means that we manage equipment. Unfortunately, we manage equipment for the right time and the right place. Some units don't have all the equipment they wish they had.
You have 20 seconds.
That's all I've got.
Okay.
Can I just take that last one?
No, you can't. Okay. Madame Lalonde, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to come to you in a minute. I just wanted to maybe bring forward and put on notice a motion. And the reason why I will do this is because there was some very reckless comments made by the leader of the official opposition on Monday night. And I'll quote, he said, "I will vote against anti-Israel resolution at the United Nations," he said. I will back Israel's right to defend itself, which includes retaliating against those that attack Israel. Israel must be able to prevent Iran from using nuclear weapons. And if necessary, that means proactively striking Iranian nuclear sites and oil installation to defund the terrorist regime. So for that reason, Mr. Chair, I would like to put on notice a motion. And it reads like, as giving the reckless and dangerous comments of the leader of the official opposition, Mr. Pierre Poilievre, calling potential strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, and pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, the committee undertake a study of the law of armed conflict and Canada's obligation under international law. Merci beaucoup. Sorry about this. Thank you very much. So I want to say thanks to all of you for coming forward in front of our committee. Maybe I'll ask Mrs. Adwin, maybe the ministers did share and made reference to possibilities that you could continue expanding on some of the most recent investment that was made and the importance of your department, but also in the context of the international risk regarding cybersecurity, cyber attack, AI, everything. I know there's been some great news, and I would really like you to expand this morning for us.
Merci, Madame Lalonde, for la question. Thank you. Mr. Chair, what I would start with is by saying that since 2020, CSE's Cyber Center has been publicly warning that the state-sponsored cyber programs of the PRC, of Russia, of Iran, and of North Korea represent a significant threat. At least 20 incidents of a malicious cyber activity on GC networks have been talked about in our most recent annual report. As the Minister mentioned, we have received in the our North Strong and Free Defense Policy Update approximately $3 billion for the CSE to work together with the Canadian Armed Forces new Cyber Command to do everything in our capabilities using the full mandates that we have respectively to counter these threats.
Thank you very much for this. And I know this is probably extremely good news. And I also understand, talking with industry, individuals in that sphere, that Canada is leading, and we're very proud of this. So Thank you. On another subject matter that I think is very dear for myself, and it was briefly touched also with the minister, any of you could, I had the pleasure over the summer to visit numerous military bases and speak with, senior ranking officers, but also our lower officers ranking. And I have to say, the passion, their energy, their desire to serve our country is extraordinary. But I know also that from a recruitment and retention, it's also something that they shared with me. Could we maybe further expand through this committee on some of the initiative that we would like to go forward on helping the recruitment, but also the retention piece?
Maybe I'll start and merci beaucoup pour la question. Je vais
Thank you very much for your question. I'll start and then I'll defer to my colleagues.
Next question, and one that we have broken down into many different parts within the department because the restraints around recruitment revolve around many different things that have been touched upon already in the committee. So the question of how slow we are to move people through the onboarding system, the security clearances that are required, the medical processes that are required, the training facilities that we have, the barracks that are available or not, the equipment. Each of these things is a separate challenge that we are dealing with individually so that as a whole, we will be able to, as the chief said recently, not only hire 6,400 a year, but hopefully more than that as well. I would add that in terms of retention, that goes hand in hand with offering adequate housing, making sure that our CAF members are properly paid, which is the case. They did receive salary increases last year. And of course, ensuring that they have careers that are interesting and fulfilling. And I think that part we see easily, that these are jobs that people want to do. We have no problem with the numbers of folks approaching us. We have a greater problem with moving them through quickly enough that we manage to retain them. But if we have, are we allowed more time?
You've got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, please.
It's heartening to learn of the motivation of young Canadians and easy to be inspired, but also redouble our efforts in our responsibility to them. This committee has recognized the connection between professional conduct and culture, people and recruitment, and how that affects readiness. So it's no surprise to the committee that recruitment, changes to process, changes to procedures and mindset is the number one priority for both our deputy and the chief of defense.
Thank you, Madame Lalonde. Madame Normandin, 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. I'd like to get back to the question I asked of the minister on the impact in cutbacks in terms of a troop training capacity. The minister didn't said that he hadn't heard it. He said there has been no impact. From what I gathered, there has been some kind of impact analysis that allows him to be this clear on that. I'm wondering if any studies have been done, and if so, can those studies that indicate there has been no impact on training be given to the committee? I can't point specifically to a particular study, but over time, it's important to be sure that we are in a position to train people when we need to train them. And so troops throughout the country receive training. The issue of operational readiness remains. It's important that they be able to take part in our exercises here in Canada, but also abroad with our international partners. And of course, in the context of deployments in Latvia. But you can see also we've deployed these people, we've taken part in exercises, and this indicates that we have indeed been able to address the issues of training over time. Given the increase in demand, I'm wondering whether we have any documentation to the effect that this training is in proportion to the growing needs and that there's no problem with resources. Actually, that's the major issue that we're dealing with right now, and perhaps the Vice can help me with this. But when you take into consideration how many people you can onboard, you kind of have to wonder how many people can actually take the courses and pass those courses. So we might have to change some of the programs to provide access on a continuous basis so people don't have to wait a few weeks or months between these courses.
Just
to add to that, Mr. Chair, we discussed this, the beginning of the process. We discussed the changes to the medical testing, aptitude, and the change in mindset. But when we discussed this, we said it is a pipeline. It's a capacity, capability, process, and priority continuum. And because of that, we have to make some choices as to the decision we need to make to reorient the members or the resources to broaden our training capacity, from basic training all the way to deployment. Thank you very much. The minister mentioned that the relationship with industry was complex. At times, and we've heard a number of witnesses strongly suggest that Canada set up a defense industrial policy, and that is something NATO's asking for, to increase our industrial defense capabilities. So what is actually in place now when it comes to policies? Can we expect that there will be a actual Canadian policy when it comes to defense and relations with the industry? We fully agree that there needs to be a defense industry strategy for Canada. It would be complex, for sure, but we have to look at the impacts throughout the country. This is something we would enjoy discussing with the committee, not necessarily in this particular space, but it would be very useful to have your impressions on these matters as well. What we are really seeking is to have a strategic partnership with the various partners throughout the country and be sure that we will get the supply of what we need when we need it. And that gets back to the issue of ammunition. We are having challenges. The industry was not ready to increase the supply to this extent, despite the fact that we could see that the need was coming. Now we have the money and we want to do this together. Thank you. I'd like to hear what you have to say about the announcement made in September on ComCyber. We know that Canada was not conducting cyber operations. From what I understand, that won't be the case with ComCyber either. I'm wondering what added value there is in creating and striking ComCyber, because it seems to me it's a bit of a redirection of the same thing with no specific mission or additional staff. Or I can start and then I can turn to my colleagues for further support. I think the most important thing is that the idea is to favor that activity. The issues we're dealing with right now indicate that this is going to increase in significance in the next few months. And actually, as of now, we've already discussed government investment in the field and the realm of cybersecurity. And we see this is something that our partners are putting a lot of emphasis on, and that there are many new avenues of cooperation by working on this.
Or Steve?
Question, and I would like to see it answered, but it's not. We've run out of time. Madame Matheson.
Just before this meeting began, we received a letter from the Department of National Defense on military housing. These numbers show that we're only on track to build 650 units across the whole country in the next 5 years. Now, I filed a order paper question earlier in the year, and it claimed the wait list for CAF housing was 1,964 applicants. So, and we know that the CAF needs to build about 5,000 new homes. So the plan's currently not where it needs to be. What steps are you taking to fill this gap?
Thank you very much for the question. Housing is something that has been a challenge for us for decades, and we can only spend the money that we have. obviously. Though there is a lot of money coming up that you have seen and mentioned, and the number of houses that we are expected to build, it doesn't actually show what we currently spend, of course. And we already have tens of millions of dollars annually in building and procuring new housing, as well as renovating the housing that we already have. In addition to that, though, and to the industrial strategy point, we are looking to work with industry very differently, with the housing development industry very differently, because we know we need housing in very different ways. So we have land, obviously, and we have space available that we know the municipalities and the provinces and territories want us to use for housing. So we are shortly going out with information to developers around the country, and very specifically in certain spots, but asking for information on levels of interest in building housing that could serve not only CAF members, but also the local population, and indeed, where possible, focus on Indigenous communities. And what we would like as well is to be able to include in those new buildings daycare, childcare centers, and make sure they are accessible to all. And so therefore hitting multiple stones at the same time. So a lot more to follow on that. It's really a good news story, I hope, in working with the housing developers too.
Currently in the House, we have Bill C-66. I'm hoping that we can get past some shenanigans in the House in order to bring this bill to committee. A lot of people have been waiting a long time for it to be brought forward, and I know there are a lot of concerns. We have a lot of work to do in this committee on that piece of legislation, but I'm concerned too about ensuring that more cases aren't stayed due to the transferring of cases between jurisdictions. Can you provide any updates on how many cases have been successfully transferred and how many cases have successfully reached a verdict in the civilian courts, and how have we seen any more cases stayed?
I don't have that information, although I don't think any more have been stayed. I don't think you would. We'll have to provide that to you later.
Okay, I would appreciate that you provide that information to the committee. Beyond culture change, there's this perpetuation amongst, or feeling amongst survivors that there's this rotten apple theory that if we can get through a handful of bad actors on this stage, that the problem will go away. And they certainly believe that cannot happen, that the problem is permissive culture, allows perpetrators to use their power and test how far they'll go. So beyond Bill C-66, what's the government's next steps to combating sexual misconduct?
We would certainly agree that there is no single solution, that there is no one bad apple or group that we could get rid of and that would make the difference. This is an ongoing challenge for all of us, and it starts at the level of recruitment, making sure that the people we're recruiting understand the role and the responsibilities of being a member of the military, and ensuring that they uphold the highest codes of conduct and behavior throughout their career. So while we're also continuing through our training at every possible opportunity and demonstrating leadership at the top, both on the civilian side as well as on the uniform side, there will be a constant demonstration of what is expected of military members throughout their careers. Maybe there's more specifics. You know, there's all
general. Are there specifics that you can point to?
So training, for sure, that is an integral part of everything that we do. The supports remain in place, as you have seen, but I'd really rather focus on prevention than trying to deal with the impacts afterwards. And I think that really comes down to how we react and interact daily with our colleagues and members.
Was there something further from the Lieutenant General?
Only to compliment that, it begins with the implementation of all 209 recommendations from the 4 external audits. As was mentioned, there's training and education, but we're trying to adapt behavior, and that can only be done if we are monitoring ourselves in a different way. I think the most important undertaking by General Carignan is the selection of leaders and recognizing that there has been bias in the way we were doing that. So getting external views, getting external looks at the individuals we are identifying for progression in a way that's completely different than we've done in the past. But this is going to be an ongoing endeavor to change culture for a long time.
Masson, well, we might be able to do this if we run it tight. 5-minute round, 25 minutes. We should be able to make it. Starting with Ms. Gallant, 5 minutes, please.
My questions are for CSE. Now, other nations like the U.S. have mandated critical security practices like multi-factor authentication in 2021 and are actively adopting zero trust architecture. Why is Canada lagging in implementing these fundamental safeguards across government agencies?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, CSE, in our most recent annual report, published quite a lot of detail about the extent to which we are issuing advice and guidance in lockstep with the Americans and our other Five Eye allies concerning cybersecurity best practices for industry and for government.
Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022 mandates that organizations in 16 critical infrastructure sectors report significant cyber incidents to CISA within 72 hours and ransomware payments within 24 hours. What is Canada doing? What comparable legislation or regulations does Canada have in place for mandatory cyber incident reporting across critical infrastructure sectors? And what are the specific reporting timelines and requirements for organizations?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Bill C-26, an act respecting cybersecurity, is currently in the Senate awaiting second reading. This will create mandatory reporting obligations for critical infrastructure, but only those that are federally regulated. So that's 4 sectors.
Okay. How are we effectively addressing the risk of insider threats within government agencies?
They do? I'm sorry.
By itself.
I'm sorry. This is my first time
That's
in
all right.
committee.
That's all right. Yes.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, the security and intelligence community in the Government of Canada is taking a number of steps to address insider threat. Many of these have been reviewed recently by our review agencies, and some of those measures are concerning the security clearances that we ask employees to undertake. Other measures I can't talk about in this public environment.
How does our cybersecurity funding compare to other G7 nations on a per capita basis?
Thank you for the question. I will look into the per capita funding. I don't have that breakdown exactly, but I can say that we are very competitive with and comparable to our G7 allies and Five Eye partners.
What recent investments has Canada made in advanced cyber defense technologies to counter state-sponsored cyber threats?
The $3 billion I referred to from the defense policy update is a significant investment in exactly that.
How is the government ensuring that cybersecurity considerations are integrated into all aspects of policy making, national policy making?
My colleagues in, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Our colleagues in the Treasury Board Secretariat and the CSE and others relevant departments are working together to ensure the adoption of cybersecurity best practices and standards in all government operations and procurements.
How prepared are we to respond to a large-scale cyber attack on national infrastructure or government systems?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure we can ever be prepared enough. That is to say, we are doing the best we can, and I don't hope that we find out.
How are we addressing these cybersecurity risks associated with emerging technologies like 5G, IoT, and AI?
Thank you for the question. In the Bill C-26, an act respecting cybersecurity, addresses exactly the 5G opportunity. In other avenues of advanced technology, such as artificial intelligence or the advent of quantum computing, there is a significant amount of research underway in research agencies and CSE recently published with the National Research Council a call for proposals concerning artificial intelligence security.
Yes, our recent Nobel Prize laureate is very concerned about how we're going to protect ourselves against AI. So I trust that you'll be looking into that. How effective are our current measures in preventing and mitigating ransom software attacks on public institutions?
We have a track record. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We have a track record of success in protecting government institutions. Of course, it is, ça va sans dire que we sometimes don't know what we don't know. And
investments in securing Canada's electoral systems against cyber interference.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that?
Are there sufficient investments in securing Canada's electoral systems against cyber interference?
The fact that there have been investments made has been talked about in the public inquiry on foreign interference. I cannot comment on the sufficientness of them.
How is the government ensuring that cybersecurity policies are effectively implemented across all departments?
Thank you for the question. Could you just repeat, is it how effectively?
How is the government ensuring that cybersecurity policies are effectively implemented across all departments?
Thank you for the question. Again, the CSE works closely with the Treasury Board Secretariat to make sure that all government departments are adopting and implementing the measures that we impose upon them.
Thank you, Ms. Gallant. Mr. Collins, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to start with the question. One of the questions that I asked the minister when he was here, in his parting remarks to CAF members, General Eyre urged members to quote inoculate yourself and those around you against toxic disinformation in our society, and we must stop it from seeping into our ranks. And so my question to the minister was around Russia and China's efforts, but you also struggle with what your members, read and see in the news. There's a crazy theory right now being pushed by an alt-right American representative who's talking about government controlling the weather. And, here during the COVID situation, we had the ivermectin party of Canada pushing misinformation in the House and undermining the efforts of public health officials as it relates to combating the virus and the efficacy of the vaccine. And so, the misinformation isn't just coming from Russia and China. It's actually, it's all around us. And so back to that inoculation that General Eyre referenced, and I'm almost hesitant to use the word because it almost sounds like a conspiracy theory in the making. But can you talk about your efforts internally as it relates to dealing with your members and the misinformation that they might hear from our enemies abroad and domestically, even within this House?
Thank you. Chair, I was getting excited about the button again. We spent a lot of time thinking about the 4 contested areas of warfighting. Happy to expand, but one of them is the information environment. And we tend to think of these in terms of our adversary that are well known, some of the threat actors and what they're doing to counter narratives or to use information in a way counter to what we understand is the truth. Where we need to work harder is the prevalence of social media and the way young Canadians communicate, exchange, and learn. And we're not there yet. But it begins with over-communicating from leaders using all the tools that we have available to ensure that our understanding of what's happening and our truthfulness gets out first. But it's a constant tension. And in one way, we have young, educated men and women that are challenging us on why and what, and they're learning it through social media. So the exchange is much healthier. It challenges us as leaders. We have much more work to do in the information environment.
May I? The CSE is also responsible for a public awareness campaign on behalf of the Government of Canada. It doesn't have a catchy title, but it is disinformation.ca. We believe that a big opportunity is to encourage Canadians in all parts of the country and in every place to think skeptically about the information that they receive.
Thanks for those answers. I'll switch gears now to recruitment. It's obviously top of mind for everyone around the table. Normally, some initiatives don't go forward because there's lack of funds, and this isn't one of those instances. I had the opportunity in June to tour the recruitment center right here in Ottawa and spent a couple hours with staff in terms of walking me through how someone makes application and then gets the offer. And I found, that internally, there's that whole issue. Well, for me, it boiled down to in the office that I was in, and I'm sure it's different across the country, a number of vacancies then prevent the information and the applications from moving forward in a timely way. And, it's just so disheartening to see so many people apply. And by the time that they've received an offer, they've already made another life decision, right? They have to pay the bills. They have to find maybe other employment. They thought this process might be 4 to 6 weeks, and it ends up to be 10 to 12 months. And so something internally is broken. And, you've received a lot of questions today, and we've talked about this in the committee in the past, and we actually need to do a study on it. And I'm just, can you give us some details in terms of how we fix that? And, the dominoes fall in a way that work against us. And to know that we're turning so many people away is, it's worse than disheartening. So we've heard some generalities today, but can you provide specifics to the committee?
I'll endeavor to do so. The first instance, we recognize that we're in a competition for talent. I was recently with my counterparts in the Pentagon from Australia, UK, New Zealand, as well as the US, and we all share the same concern. We're competing for talent. We recognized in the second instance that our own processes are working against us. So although we've given some specific examples, Chair, we're talking about business transformation is what we're looking at. We're looking at how security clearances, medical, and aptitude testing is done. We are not compromising standards. We want to access Canadians faster. And so instead of having front end all that completed, we're doing smart risk-based decisions on entering folks in with reliability checks and completing that process while they're doing their basic training. That's one example of the business transformation. But it's absolutely true that we need to automate our system. This is the digital age, and we need to be digital in our approach. My own son is going through the recruiting process, so I'm learning without saying anything, and I can accept there are significant frustrations. It's not a one-size-fits-all. We are not compromising standards. For some of our competitive trades for the men and women, we want to do the aptitude testing and the deep security clearances faster.
May I just as a side say that this has been a preoccupation of the committee, and in the last time the CDS was here, she undertook to provide more detail in the plan. She is about to receive a letter reminding her of her undertaking to provide more detail. So, with that, 2.5 minutes, Madame Normandin.
Merci beaucoup. J'aimerais revenir sur comme.
Thank you. I'd like to get back to ComCyber. You mentioned that its role was to focus on the importance for Canada of being more active when it comes to cybersecurity. But I get the feeling that it's as though it's a creature that is created with people from various areas. Let's say they focus on acquisition of information, but no additional funds have been allocated. So how does this improve Canada's credibility internationally when it comes to Pillar 2 of AUKUS? Is that enough?
We all want to answer.
Je commence?
Can I start? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. With respect to CAF Cyber and any cyber operation, the CSC's annual report admits that there has been progress in a number of operations, but there's no further detail. That said, I can promise this. Since the bill has given us some authorities, we've exercised those. you suggested that the CAF announcement was actually just pulling together some resources from elsewhere, but I can assure you that that pulling together is very important because it means we're on an equal footing with our allies. I'll turn to my colleague. He'll have more to say on this, but I can promise you this. From the perspective of the CSE and with our Five Eyes partners, we are a much appreciated ally in this for our capabilities in this area. I'd like to move to another issue. Does the idea of having additional positions matter there? How can we be competitive versus the private sector? Are we creating new positions in this organization?
5 seconds to answer that question. I'm going to just move on. And if you can work your answer in some other way, that would be helpful. Madame Matheson, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Just in terms of following up on some of the questions around recruitment, there are significant changes that are happening. And a lot of times that it sounds great at the top, but a lot of these significant changes maybe aren't going through in terms of the ranks of those who have to enforce them. How are you communicating that with those people who have to actually enforce those changes?
Maybe just, Mr. Chair, just precision around, do you mean the implementation of the changes we're making? Or,
yes.
Maybe I'll use an example, Chair, related to security clearances. Obviously, we're not going to compromise the standards, but we need to change when and with threshold at what point, because it demands a number of resources from the department, but also from CSIS to allow that. But that's an example of a change in process that's very centralized, because of the assurance we need to give ourselves, but also our allies because of some of the equipment that's being used that is their intellectual property. In terms of, maybe to flip it now to the recruiter at the recruiting center, the Chief of Defense and our deputy have created a new forum called the Recruiting Campaign Board, where we look at specific issues along the path from interest all the way through the completion of training. And the decisions that are made on a Thursday are transmitted directly through the recruiting centers immediately. For example, the aptitude testing or the medical. The medical will be the next topic, but the aptitude testing, we're going to be continuing with that, but it's when it takes place, before entry or after. That changes the threshold for some of the recruiting or the recruiters' work on which files get accepted faster.
And just with my remaining time, Mr. Chair, I would like to put a motion on notice. And my apologies to the translators. This is quite lengthy, and I did not give it to them in advance. So to read into the record that given that the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to change its actions to prevent the real and imminent risk of genocide, given that the UN Human Rights Council called on all states to cease the sale and transfer of weapons to Israel immediately or else risk complicity in war crimes or acts of genocide, given that Parliament voted in March of 2024 in support of the NDP's motion to end arms transfers to Israel, given Canada's clear legal obligations under the Arms Trade Treaty against transferring weapons to another country if there is a probable risk that they could be used in violations of international humanitarian law, given that the government refusing to close loopholes that allow military goods and technology to be shipped from Canada to Israel via the United States through the Canada-U.S. Defense Production Sharing Agreement, and given that the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of National Defense have refused to give clear answers regarding the potential use of Canadian exports of military goods and technology in Israel's horrific siege on Gaza, one, the committee immediately order the production of all relevant memoranda, briefing notes, emails, records of conversation, and all other related records from the offices of the Minister of National Defense, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Privy Council Office, and the Prime Minister's Office related to arms transfers to Israel. 2, all relevant memoranda, briefing notes, emails, records of conversation, and all other related records from the offices of the Minister of National Defense, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Privy Privy Council Office, the Canadian Commercial Corporation, and the Prime Minister's Office related to the $60 million deal to transfer Canadian-made M933A1 120mm high explosive mortar cartridges and related equipment to the United States. 3, all relevant memoranda, briefing notes, emails, records of conversation, and all other related records from the offices of the Minister of National Defence, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Privy Council Office, and the Canadian Commercial Corporation, and the Prime Minister's Office related to analysis of Canada's arms trade treaty obligations, and 4, all legal analysis conducted by the Department of National Defence, the Department of Justice, ISED, Global Affairs Canada, and the Canadian Commercial Corporation on the impact of the U.S. Canada Defence Production Sharing Agreement on our international law obligations. 5, all relevant memoranda, briefing notes, emails, records of conversation, and all other related records from the offices of the Minister of National Defence, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Privy Council Office, and the Prime Minister's Office related to Canada-Israel Strategic Partnership. 2, that these documents be provided to the committee within 60 days. That pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, upon receipt of these documents, the committee undertake a study of Canada's defence industry and our arms trade treaty obligations, that the committee shall hold a minimum of 8 meetings for the duration of the study, and that the committee invite the Minister of National Defence, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Industry, the CEO of the Canadian Commercial Corporation, along with relevant government officials, international law experts, researchers, and civil society organizations, and that the committee report its findings to the House. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, and Mr. Bazan, 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I'll be looking forward to talking to JDLS in London, Ontario, to talk about how this is going to hurt jobs in their plant with that motion that was just tabled. Miss or ADM Hadwin, you mentioned a website. Did you say it was disinformation.ca?
I thought so.
Okay, I just bought it because it was available on the GoDaddy. It's not owned. I think you guys should get it bought up real quick.
Yeah. I'll get back to you with the.
Yeah. So if we're going to be handling disinformation, let's make sure that the Russians or the PRC doesn't get a hold of that before too long.
It's on the conservative website.
Yeah. Anyway, I also want to go back to a comment by General Kelsey in response to an earlier question from Mr. Stewart. You said that the shortage of 9mm munitions, the shortage of maintenance on vehicles in our reserve units is all because we're essentially needing those dollars for Reg Force.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I was acknowledging poorly that the past 3 decades we have optimized the Army in this case for contribution efforts. We did such with great efficiency, such that in many cases we didn't have the people to equal our structure nor the equipment. This was a choice, and it manifested most precisely in our reserve units that we actually rely on heavily. This was to optimize our output. We made choices here in Canada across our units.
So this is more of a function of the recent budget cuts that we see, that you're not having the ability, almost $1 billion a year is getting cut, the lapse funding, you can't tap that to help our reserve units. We got, a lot of our different units out there at the armory level is well staffed, that they need the support to make sure that the equipment works and that they're fully trained.
It's absolutely true that we want to invest on our reserves better. We need them. We need the people. We need their expertise.
Because essentially your surge capacity is your reserves.
It is indeed. And in fact, we've got a number of them working full-time right now. We can get the exact number, but it's between 8,000 and 9,000 reservists working full-time for us, filling key positions.
Okay. General Air in the past has been here and talked about the shortages that we faced. We're almost 16,000 short of members of the Canadian Armed Forces, or in addition, 10,000 of those that are already through basic training are still undertrained and undeployable. A number of months ago, do we have current numbers right now? Like, where are we at where we're supposed to be as mandated strength, and how short are we for the different divisions of the Canadian Armed Forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, Special Forces? We're still short. How much?
We are well short. We'll get you you deserve the precise answer. I don't have it with me. In terms of the recruiting, the folks coming through the door, we're halfway through our intake plan, and we're better than 50%, but we have much work to be done. And as I alluded to, we use those shortfalls to access our reserve forces. We need to make smart choices because with every reservist we take out of the units, they can't fulfill their own training obligations. So we have lots of work to be done.
Minister Anand, 18 months ago plus, made the announcement that we were buying NASAMS and for Ukraine, and then announced that they were en route over 14 months ago. Still not delivered. When are the NASAMS going to finally get delivered to Ukraine that we purchased with Canadian taxpayer dollars?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In fact, NASAMS Canada has invested to make sure that Ukraine is provided with NASAMS. We're working with the U.S. government in order to make sure that this is delivered, and at this point in time, we're expecting delivery in 2025.
When in 2025?
Early in 2025.
Yeah, because they need that system now. They're getting bombed every day. Now, also there is a promise to send some renovated or improved upon LAVs, the older Coyotes, that were getting re-armored and re-equipped at Armatech. Has that contract been signed? All those LAVs are to also be sent to Ukraine.
The contract for Armatech is being worked on by Commercial Canadian Corporation, and that is in discussion at this point in time.
Okay.
Mr. Zan, Madame Lalonde, final 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you. We are here to talk about the priority of the Minister of National Defense, yourself, through maybe a mandate letter. Certainly, if I look at what's been happening in the Indo-Pacific region, and we have not really touched on this today, and I certainly, we've seen a regional tension in the South China Sea, and certainly more broadly in the Indo-Pacific. I also understand that we recently in the region, we are talking with like-minded partners on some topics, from naval partnership on artificial intelligence. Could you speak on how specifically the CAF role in the Indo-Pacific region has changed over the past 2 years? And what is this intended to signal? And I know there's been great initiatives, so I would really like us to share this to the committee.
I'll start and then others can add. We were really pleased to have been part of the Indo-Pacific strategy that was led by our colleagues at Global Affairs, and to be able to access then some new funding that allows us to really ramp up our operations and exercises across the Indo-Pacific. This has meant in practical terms much more interaction and direct collaboration at all levels, both on the civilian side, including CSE, I would add to that, as well as on the military side. In fact, our senior researchers and developers have just come back from discussions in Australia where we were working very explicitly on issues that we all face right now, including, for instance, underwater drones, other technologies that are being developed. AI would be another one of those too, where working together we can make a difference. You will also have seen much mention of our sailing plans in Indo-Pacific, our work in Operation Neon, recognizing what is happening in North Korea and South Korea, and regular, of course, interactions with all of our other major trading partners there. The minister was recently in South Korea and in Japan as well. And of course, the Prime Minister is in ASEAN right now, in Vientiane and Laos. But for perhaps some more specifics on the military side.
I recently was with my counterpart in the U.S., and unsolicited, offered Mr. Chair his sincere thanks for what Canada is doing, showing greater, more visible presence in the maritime and air domains. Perhaps the undervalued but hugely important is where Canada is actually leading in some defense research initiatives that has caught the attraction of certainly Australia and New Zealand. All that to say, as we expand our presence there and refoster our relationships with Japan and the Republic of Korea and others, it is noticed by our allies and surely welcome.
Thank you very much. We only have a few minutes left, and I really would like to hear. First, I want to say thanks to all of you, but also to all our CAF and their families for their enormous contribution to Canada and to the world. But maybe I would just like to leave it open. This committee has been hard at work trying to bring out partisan interests into this committee. And today with you here, it would be nice maybe to have a few thoughts about, based on the priorities and the mandate letter, what's next? What do we need to focus on? I know we talked about many initiatives. If there's something that you would like to share with us, it would be greatly appreciated.
Oh, okay. Actually, what we would really welcome is a conversation with you, perhaps over in one of our buildings. We have some big plans that we need to discuss, including the defense industrial strategy that we need to draft, and we would really appreciate having input from all across the country, but particularly from this committee. Housing, we're looking forward to your reporting on housing coming up. We think we have lots of good ideas, but there's always more to come. And in fact, the interactions directly with those affected are going to make the difference in what the outcome is and how successful we are on our Pathfinder initiative. Also, always happy to discuss I know we didn't really today talk about procurement reform. This is something very much on our minds that many things that we can control internally, that we can change our own processes to be able to speed up. It does mean making choices that are difficult. And in some cases, if we're doing more what I would call directed procurement, it means that somebody doesn't get it. So there is always a trade-off, but that does manage then to speed up the actual outcome at the end. We've seen some instances of that being very successful recently. Okay. Actually, I would point to the RFI on submarines, which we're hoping will be a demonstration of how we can actually do procurement differently, with the success at the end being the capabilities that we need in a timely manner.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there, Madame Lalonde. On behalf of the committee, I wanted to thank you, but I also want to thank you for the invitation to have further discussions in another setting. Partisanship aside, we're all going in the same direction here, and we are in a threat environment that is, how should we say, ever accelerating, ever challenging. On that point, colleagues, when we return from the Thanksgiving break, yes, yeah. For the ever alert Ms. Gallant, that is not a hint. And besides which, that it would be way above my pay grade. We have for October 22nd, we have the Ukrainian MPs for the first hour, and Messrs. Fadden and Thibault for the second. And then we will do a briefing on the Middle East on the Thursday, continue with our space defense on the 29th, and then the 31st, the Finnish speaker, and then for the first hour, and space defense for the second hour. So hopefully we will, yes.
Very briefly, I know there was conversation regarding our delegation of MPs from Ukraine. Are we hosting them in this particular setting in a very open format, or they have preferred a more in-camera personal interaction?
We haven't heard, but I'm assured by the clerk that he'll cook a good breakfast for them. So, with that, meeting adjourned.
It's an afternoon.